I'm live. It is January 10th. It is my 16-year anniversary with my wife, and I'm going to share a few minutes of it with whoever listens to uh, my live YouTube videos, which I'm going to guess is very few people. But I have, I don't know if anybody else has that sense that in life, um, there's lots of things that feel like my task to do. There's lots of things that are that certainly are my task to do. And the big one is caring for my family, caring for myself, caring for my community. Giving of myself in those ways. And then when it comes to sort of purposes uh, for me beyond that, um, I have this lifelong desire to communicate with people, but uh, really to have dialogue with people. So this is a solo thing. So it's obviously not dialogue. Solo is not dialogue, but I'm hoping it will stimulate dialogue because a topic keeps coming to my mind, and um, I have a sense that something needs to be reframed. Basically, in short, as the thumbnail or as the name of the video says, the culture war, which, um, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the term culture war is somewhat associated with Jordan Peterson. That the culture war is for for people who are representing Jesus Christ. It feels to me like the culture war is accepted uh, as a real thing in a way that isn't reflective, in a way that maybe is a little bit of a misnomer. I don't know that we understand what we mean when we say the culture war. And I guess I should also say that lots of people don't use the term. It was popular for a while, and now it's not. But I think I'm referring to what appears to be the war that we see when we look out. Oh, I got something. When we look out on the public discourse today, right? And there's no getting around the fact that uh, the online world, the internet, is a huge driver and venue and sculptor and shaper of that war. So I looked up culture war, the definition of the culture war, and it's basically, actually, let me do it again real quick. Culture war definition. Yeah, and it's okay. Culture war, a conflict between groups, especially liberal and conservative groups that have different cultural ideals, beliefs, and philosophies. Um, so, especially liberal and conservative groups, which I think is even that is becoming a little bit antiquated as people accept the limits of liberalism. Um, so, I've had a couple of chats with people on Twitter, and let's face it, it's likely those are going to be some of the only people to watch this video. So I guess what I'll say is what I immediately noticed when chatting with people on Twitter about the culture war and about my opinions on the culture war. Uh, I immediately recognized that I wasn't quite, almost like, not ready to talk about it, because I don't have my thoughts completely clear on the subject, but I have some long-term intuitions. Um, and this preamble is too long and rambly, but because I went live, I have to commit to it now, and I cannot restart. And we're 4 minutes and 50 seconds in. Okay, so the culture, uh, when Jordan Peterson started sort of representing the culture war to people. Um, it was over, initially like transgender issues and the concept of people being a gender that they weren't at birth, and basically his refusal to use those people's pronouns um, was seen as kind of drawing a line in the sand, um, and kind of holding a line that for Peterson was uh, a line in the sand that he felt shouldn't be crossed. Um, and that's when freedom of speech really became a huge topic, and uh, so as the years have worn on, because Peterson probably started this kind of thing in about 2017. Not that I'm giving him full credit for the culture war itself, but Peterson started 2000. I mean, let's say 2016 or so. Um, it has become, I think, even for probably most of you and me, a very frustrating thing to see. Um, I think we're all comfortable with the fact that you know in our history, human beings have had to um, deal with, in the distant past, dealing with sort of daily or at least more frequent existential, life-threatening things like, getting eaten by a lion or getting attacked by a violent enemy at any time and killed and all that kind of thing. And as time has gone on, yes, there's still violence, but um, we have we've seen that most people are not feeling threatened. Their life isn't feeling threatened day to day. So all of these things like violence and war have kind of gone internal, and have kind of become like interpersonal and cultural, and in a sense ideological and not physical, right? So the culture war, in the way that I'm using it, I guess, is a term for the way we are fighting with each other, and there are many groups fighting. It isn't just two, um, and uh, I think the funny thing is most people would agree that the right side doesn't seem to be winning the cultural war, and that's uh, that's an interesting thing because uh, if you are someone perceived as liberal, um, there's plenty of evidence to say that the conservatives are winning the cultural war. Donald Trump won the popular vote by getting it from uh, people who generally would consider themselves conservative, or at least have deemed that it was the time to vote conservative. And then at the same time, um, Trump and the conservatives uh, are framing the liberals as being the almost like the oppressors. Um, and it strikes me that this war that's going on between left and right, but there's so many more, considerations. This cultural war is benefiting someone, and that someone is not either of the sides. To me, it feels like this is uh, is a show. It's a play, and while people do imagine winning the cultural war, they don't. I don't think that they really expect to, and it just occurs to me that yeah, like I said, the cultural war is just a play. The world is a stage, and this is a play. And it grieves me as a Christian person because the messaging that I see from Christianity is, I think, largely and understandably, that we need to fight for the good. We need to uphold righteousness. We need to draw more lines in the sand. We need to refuse to cross certain lines, and this manifests in different ways. Like some of the kind of more the ways that have been publicly mocked would be something like not making a cake for a gay wedding or something like that. And this is how people are taking part in this cultural war. But there's a few things that have been part of my thinking for a while that kind of undermine this, and possibly even undermine the idea that that we should be framing this as a war in the way that we're framing it. Um, because I'm really interested in the ideas of René Girard, and Girard's Girard's general thesis is that um, is the mimetic theory, mimetic desire, that our desires are quite often um, the result of copying the desires of others, and that a sort of group mentality develops around these shared desires, and then at a certain point, it becomes necessary um, to sacrifice a scapegoat in order to soothe the sort of conflicts that have come from the ways that our desires and our copying of each other's desires have destabilized society. And before Christ, according to Girard, before Christ, um, the killing of a scapegoat or scapegoats would actually accomplish the goal. Society would be soothed for a time. So ritual sacrifice was a thing, and he kind of controversially says it was a thing because it actually worked. But that after Christ, that Christ's life, death, and resurrection um, signaled or triggered the end of our ability as human beings um, to be satisfied by the scapegoat. And Rene Girard, because Jesus was the scapegoat and was truly innocent, and that innocence was known, and I think that represents a shift in human consciousness. It's not just I think human consciousness just developed at that point to where we were no longer and can no longer be truly satisfied and truly satiated by sacrificing a scapegoat. And um, one of the things that actually lends credence to Girard's theories to me is the way that he interprets the verse, like Christ says, I didn't come to bring you peace, but a sword. Because I believe that the resurrection of Christ, when that happened, represented the time after which we would see every possible means of um, attempting to solve society's ills or our own personal ills by sacrificing a scapegoat. So in other words, the elapsing centuries are not people going, it wasn't like when Christ resurrected, we just like shook our heads and said, oh yeah, I guess we shouldn't scapegoat anymore. Um, it was more like we still wanted to scapegoat, we still wanted to kill a scapegoat to solve society's ills, but it just didn't satisfy us anymore on a deep and spiritual level, and so we had to keep trying to find new ways. And I think that has been catastrophic in a lot of ways, and apocalyptic in a real way, like in the true sense of the term apocalypse. So um, something that Gerard has said, I've heard him say in interviews, is that the scapegoat is innocent. And that seems like such an obvious That seems like a very obvious statement. Like we all know that a scapegoat um, is innocent, but I don't think we necessarily grasp the full resonance of what Gerard meant when he said the scapegoat is innocent. Because Gerard's not saying Christ was innocent. We know that. Um, he's saying anytime there is a scapegoat, that scapegoat is innocent. And I'm probably not going to explain this well because it's a relatively new thought. But when we talk about the battle, when Christians talk about the battle not being against flesh and blood, um, I think uh, an intuition develops, or maybe could develop, that that basically separates the human beings that we are talking about, that we are talking to, from these perceived trends that and these political and these political stances that have been dividing us. um because Gerard is not overly, like, he's not rosy about the solution to all this. He says we have to love each other. Like, the solution is just truly to love each other. And so it seems to me like the war that people are fighting in society, whether they're calling it a culture war or not, so often uh, they're thinking of it in the sense of this sort of holy war of good versus evil that has been kind of, around since time immemorial. And even, like, there's even a perception that that the Bible, in the way that it talks about war, that a war of good versus evil, and about God condoning wars, that's pretty much what we're dealing with today. That we are actually, that God wants us, as people of righteousness, to war against unrighteousness. Um, and Uh, I think that's true. I think we have to war against unrighteousness, right? But with the, another thing that I think is a trend that we've noticed since the death of Christ is that, um, I think the meaning, or the importance, or even the sanctity of what it means to be human has decreased and decreased, to the point that, um, both people outside of Christianity who don't identify as Christians and people inside of Christianity, lots of those people have a very low opinion of what it means to be human. That humans are, on the one hand, you've got extreme environmentalists, who would be perceived as ultimately secular, saying that human beings are a cancer on the earth. And that's very offensive to certain conservatives. But then when you talk to those conservatives, they will also say, human beings are totally, we're total garbage. We are defined chiefly by our sin. We are evil, right? And there's biblical, there are biblical passages that they use to reinforce that. But at any rate, the market value of being a human being has gone down and down in the public discourse. Um, and so to me, my deep feeling regarding uh, Christ's resurrection through a Gerardian lens is that uh, the entire model of war and the image of war uh, has kind of run its course. Now, I want to say that, some believe that the war on Earth between human beings, like those fighting for the good and those fighting for evil, is reflective of a war that's taking place in heaven. Um, but I don't know. I think that's a very dangerous, it could be a very dangerous way to think about this, right? The war, the war in heaven between angels and demons, um, that we want to make this war down on earth, um, kind of be a reflection of that, or that maybe the war that happens, between people on earth fighting for good and fighting for evil, maybe it just is a reflection or a mirror image, of the war that's taking place in heaven between angels and demons. But it's important to note that we have a very different kind of consciousness than angels and demons, and that we're in a very different situation from angels and demons. Um, my perception is that, I mean, if you want to construe, kind of the negative human impulse, the impulse, the impulse of hatred and negation, um, that people call Satan, um, has for a long time been perfectly happy to operate inside and outside of the Christian church, both at the same time, uh, so that um, so that the purity of the sides of this war, um, is completely tainted. And and when we construe, uh, our cultural responsibilities as a war, I just think we lose the opportunity. We lose the opportunity to present to the world the irresistible love of God, which everyone, in my view, everyone's deepest intuitions tell them they need, right? So when we talk about, when Christians talk about holding the line, or the church is this bulwark against evil, I don't think they're really grokking, they're not really internalizing the fact that North America and Western culture has been to church. you know they've been to church. And one of many things that has made us a traumatized society is church. It's religious abuse. It's sexual abuse within the church. It is extreme judgmentalism in the church that has made people who feel the need to be seen, has made them feel unseen. And like, I've been fortunate to meet many addicts and many, people, who couldn't be further from church. And one of the regular themes is that they have been to church, and it has not, um, stuck for them. They felt abused, they have felt, rejected, they felt, judged. And basically, when the church and when Christianity agrees to this cultural war, um, I think that we opt out of building bridges with those people, because we make those people into we dehumanize them, and we make them into, representatives of a larger group who we feel has an evil purpose, and that is scapegoating, right? So if you are a Christian person, you meet a homeless person, you meet a transgendered person, you meet an addicted person, you meet a Satanist, whatever. If you are seeing their group, if you are not seeing the particularity of the person, and you are associating them with a group that you feel is doing evil in the world, and your purpose is to get them to change that aspect of themselves you know before you will engage, you're scapegoating, and that scapegoat is innocent. That scapegoat is innocent of the crime that you are accusing them of. So I guess, yeah, my purpose in this is, for a long time I have felt like using the analogy of war. We have to recognize that are our metaphors are very powerful in the way that we, behave in the world. Like, for example, we have the metaphor of the human being as a computer, as our brain as a computer. So we always compare, the human being uses metaphors to compare ourselves to whatever we feel to be our greatest invention, right? And the computer is how we frame it now. It's a, it's a hard drive, and it's a processor and all that, which actually is a profoundly materialist way to construe the human being. Well, I would say that the culture war is another example of a poor metaphor. And I'm not saying that there is no war going on between good and evil, and I'm not saying we can't participate in that war. Um, but I don't think that that war is lived out in the battle of man against man. I don't think that, for each of us, I don't think that we should ever view our primary contribution to that war to be our, our hot takes that we put on social media, right? Um, I think that the war is fought, um, if there is a culture war, unfortunately, I don't have the recipe for how we fight it, but we don't fight it by fighting human against human. I think we fight the culture war through connection. And if that were the way that people were fighting the culture war, I don't think I would object to the concept of it being a war. But if people were fighting a war by connecting with the other side, uh, I think it's sort of it loses the necessity to call it a war. In fact, the word war becomes a little bit of a misnomer, right? Um, yeah, this is all a bit vague, and the main thing that I want, the main thing that I would like for people in general to take on board, and possibly Christians in particular, um, is that there has to be a part of ourselves that is not at war. And, you know, I think for most people that is the case. There is a part of yourself that's not at war. And so I don't want to be accusatory, but I do think that we internalize, what other groups are like based on how it appears online, and we don't necessarily know those people. And so, um, regardless of how you're choosing to fight a war, there needs to be that part. We need to have that part of ourselves that is not at war, meaning that part of ourselves that refuses, and in fact actively works against dehumanizing anyone at all, judging anyone at all. It's a pretty radical concept, and it's slow, but in a sense, um, if we all have the feeling that the unrighteousness is winning, then I think it is a little bit misguided, or very misguided, to go out there and just hit the world with more of the same. We've got to double down, right? We've got to fight harder. We've got to draw harder lines. I don't think that is. I don't think that's the way. Okay, so this has been very rambly. This is something I would like to discuss with a human being. So if anybody actually wants to discuss this with me in person, or like over Zoom, I guess, because I'm in Canada, and probably the chances of anyone in my city even watching this video are low. Let me know in the comments, or find me on Twitter, Morning Talk Show, and let's talk, because I do want to sort of start hashing this out. Um, and even if somebody ends up in the same place that they were, I feel like it would be nice to have people reflect on the analogy of war, when it comes to culture and society, and just think through and actually affirm whether or not they think that that is the best way to construe things, right? So yeah, with that, I've seen people popping in and out. It doesn't seem like anybody's really staying, but I will end the stream. And if anybody watches this at all, please comment and say something. Argument is welcome and important, for me. So yeah, let's talk.